This is episode 89 of the Battle of Ohio podcast. Sorry we missed an episode last week, guys. Mine and Thomas's schedules have been absolutely insane lately. He's actually still busy this week, so I've got Daniel Garrett of Browns ATB on to help us get some insight on the Browns matchup this week. Say what's up, Daniel.
How's it going, guys? How are you today, Kyle?
Oh, I am just ready to get right back into the swing of things, man. Ready to get right back into it. But the Bengals are playing a really key matchup this week against the Kansas City Chiefs, and it can actually clinch the division if they win this game. Now, it's going to be a tough one, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. The Browns are playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers in a game that will actually eliminate whoever loses from the playoffs. So it is massive stakes on both sides. And I don't care if you are a Bengals fan or a Browns fan listening to this podcast. We hate the Steelers here. So, we're rooting for the team that's playing against the Steelers. I don't care what the implications are otherwise.
Yeah, no, and especially because, honestly, thinking about it, what better way to do anything than a Week 18 matchup to decide who would win the division if you guys lose. I would love that. But if you guys win here, you guys put us at 0.4% chance I'm looking at to make the playoff. So very unlikely. So Browns fans will definitely be interested in this Cincinnati game as well. It means everything. We absolutely need you guys to lose this one and make a very fun Week 18 battle for the division.
Well, it would be a very interesting Week 18 matchup that I am a little terrified of because me and Thomas both went to the Bengals Browns game earlier this year, and I did not have a good time at all. It was a trash game. But anyway, the Steelers need more help than anyone in the division to actually make the playoffs. And that's including the Ravens, who we just absolutely beat the crap out of. But the Steelers need more help than anyone in the division to actually make the playoffs. Because, and Thomas isn't here, so I'll say it, the Steelers still suck.
Welcome to the Battle of Ohio podcast, where we follow the revival of the historic rivalry between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, no, and more or less, they really need, like, even if they win, I don't believe if they win, they need us to beat you next week, I believe.
Yeah.
Would be how that would go. So it would be, they would need to beat us, and then let's be honest here. If we lose to the Steelers, I don't think the team's going to be playing well enough to beat you guys.
Well, that, and I believe if you guys lose to the Steelers, I believe you're probably not going to see Baker Mayfield.
I would assume that as well, just because we would be officially eliminated from the playoffs. And with his injury situation with the shoulder, I just think that they would rest him. Just don't want to further his injury and just play Case Keenum or Nick Mullins.
Right. Exactly. So, like I said, from the perspective of this podcast, I will be rooting for the Browns. I'll also be rooting hard for the Bengals because I'm terrified of the idea of like having to beat the Browns because we haven't beat Baker Mayfield yet. And if the Browns win, I imagine Baker Mayfield will try to tough it out for that Week 18 matchup. But then I don't know, who knows, maybe he explodes in that Week 18 matchup because that's actually a good question for you. So Thomas is one of the biggest Browns fans that I've seen as far as being a gigantic Baker Mayfield supporter. And he gets really annoyed with all of the Browns fans who hate Baker Mayfield and want him to get out. So what's your opinion, Daniel, on Baker Mayfield? Do you want to keep him or do you want him to go away?
So it depends. I am of the opinion always that you get the best player possible at every position, especially the most important one, and that's quarterback. So if you can get the upgrade, quarterback just drives winning so significantly that if you can get an upgrade, you go out and get an upgrade. If you can go out and get Derek Carr because the Raiders want to go rebuild, you go out and get him. But if you don't see that immediate significant upgrade, I don't see how you move on from Baker, because I think he's been, when healthy, he's been solid. He's had his inconsistencies for sure, but I think if you're looking at, he's a average-ish quarterback on a rookie scale deal, which a rookie contract is all you're looking for. Obviously going into that 5th-year option next year, but that's still fairly cheap. I believe for him it's like $18 million, which is a good price for an average quarterback. You're not going to really get better than that. Typically you're looking at 10 million more at least for that type of guy. So I'm of the opinion that unless you find a clear like top 10 quarterback that you can go out and get, and I think Derek Carr is like right there at the bottom of that, would be Derek Carr, Russell Wilson, that type of guy, like top 10, top 12 type guys. That's who you could go get. But other than that, like draft wise, I don't really see going out and doing that this year. I think he is good enough to make a playoff run. I don't think he's like we've seen it before. I think he's a little bit better when healthy than like a Jimmy G. So if you have everything perfect, maybe, but like everything has to be perfect. And right now the Browns roster just isn't. So that's what the quarterback fix is. But again, if there's no one better, why would you just reset for the sake of resetting? Your roster is pretty good. So I think.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think you just have to keep him, because honestly, like your best option is Russ decides he wants to go to Cleveland to win, or Derek Carr is a upgrade, not like huge, but he is an upgrade, more consistent player. And the Raiders want to rebuild. I think those are about the only two viable options I see for a different quarterback next year.
So I've compared Baker Mayfield on this podcast before to he reminds me a little bit of Andy Dalton, which we had here in Cincinnati for years. Now, obviously, now Andy Dalton is a he's definitely like a bottom tier quarterback. But part of that is the fact that he just like if he were to spend 10 years in the Bears system, I think Andy Dalton would be, a perfectly fine option for them. But the problem is, like him jumping around and everything like that, and the fact that he's getting older and some of his skills are starting to diminish. He's not quite the same player he used to be. But when he was in Cincinnati, Andy Dalton was legitimately, I feel, he wasn't always, but at his peak, he was a top 10 quarterback easily. So, and that's the way I feel about Baker Mayfield. I was actually really annoyed when the Browns drafted Baker Mayfield because I was like, crap, that's actually a really good pick. And I really believe in Baker Mayfield. And then I felt the same way when you hired Kevin Stefanski. I was like, crap, that's exactly what the Browns need. They need a no-nonsense guy who's going to come in here and actually like tone down some of the drama and everything like that. So I don't know. I think Thomas's point with Baker Mayfield is like, think back to the other. I think he said there was 32 other quarterbacks.
I believe that's the right number. Yeah.
Yeah, in which you could field an entire NFL team with the number of quarterbacks the Browns have had since they returned to the NFL. So I guess his point is like you've had Baker Mayfield and he's held the position down for like 4 years and he's done a pretty good job and they won a playoff game with him. So, a big part of the reason that he's really been struggling down the stretch this year is because of that shoulder injury. So I guess the thought process is if he gets healthy, then he could do pretty good. But then again, that goes to the point of you give him that 5th-year option. So you're saying you think it's, pretty, unless you go get, which I'm not entirely sure how I feel about Derek Carr necessarily being that much better than Baker Mayfield. But at the same time, you're saying if you can't necessarily go get like a top tier quarterback, you'd prefer to give Baker the 5th-year option.
Yeah, for sure. And the thought process with a guy like Carr is if they're rebuilding, you can get him for, say, a first, flip Baker for, say, a third, and you're pretty much moving down from the first round to the third round for the cost of that quarterback upgrade. It wouldn't be a significant investment. Whereas a better guy like Russ is going to cost multiple first. So that's where I can see where either of those options would work out, which again, you always go after the best quarterback possible. So if you can go get Russ, you go get Russ. But yeah, I like you said, I think the 5th-year option is a very viable thing. And then after that, I think you try to not invest in terms of an extension. I think you try out the franchise tag until you either see enough to be able to give him a middle of the road quarterback contract or something like that where you're invested there. But I think you probably end up at least using the first year of the franchise tag, and then maybe you look at extension after that, after his 6th year.
All right, cool. So let's go ahead and talk about the Browns-Steelers game, though. So what do you think? Because, I mean, this is a big, like I said, whoever loses this game is eliminated from the playoffs. So this is essentially a playoff game. Now, obviously, it's a playoff game with the Steelers, who, as I said in the intro, suck. So, we'll see how, the competition really is. But, like, what do you think, A, what are the Browns' chances of, pulling away the win this week? And B, I believe the Browns did lose to the Steelers last time y'all played,
yes,
right?
Yeah,
it was really
15-10, I believe.
Yeah. So what do you think the chances of the Browns winning this time around are, and what do you think they need to do to come away with a win?
So I think they should definitely be favored. I think that I would put 65-ish% chance of them coming out of this with a win. I think the key has to be last game, the running game was pretty rough. Couldn't really get the ball moving. And the Steelers just recently have not been nearly as good at stopping the run as they were when we first played them. And so if we can get Chubb going, I think that's going to be the key to the game. Really, any time he's struggled, the offense really just slows down. And he is a guy where the more carries you get him, the more effective he becomes later in games. But I just think that he has to be the key guy and the key cog of this offense, especially given, the receivers haven't necessarily been playing that great as of late. Jarvis has had his issues, and Peoples-Jones is really the only competent receiver you have out there. So not really having a whole lot of weapons in the passing game has been an issue. So I really think leaning on Chubb to run the ball is going to be the best bet. And I would assume that another part of that will be the fact that Wills is now going to be back at left tackle. And so that allows Bitonio to kick back inside, get Michael Dunn out the lineup compared to the last few weeks, and have your choice of playing either Hudson or Hance at that right tackle position. And so I think getting those guys back where you're getting not only a starting left tackle back, but you're also moving back your Pro Bowl caliber guard into his natural position, which, to be fair, he played very well at left tackle.
Right.
But I think he is a better guard. So you get 1.5 players upgraded there along that offensive line. So I really do think that will help. And like I said before, just getting Chubb going is going to be the key here. We just couldn't run the ball last time against the Steelers, and that really did kill us.
All right. So sorry, my brain just kind of stopped. But so if the Browns do win this week, do you think that they can actually translate that into making the playoffs? Obviously, if they win this week, it's all about beating the Bengals next week. And they laid the fucking wood on the Bengals the last time that they played us, man. That was an awful game for me, and it was a great game for Thomas. But do you think the Browns can do it again?
So I've thought of the AFC North as this giant circle.
Mm-hmm.
the Steelers are built to beat the Browns. The Browns are built to beat the Bengals. The Bengals are built to beat the Ravens, and the Ravens are built to beat the Steelers. So that's the way I've been thinking about this whole circle. So I don't know, man. So with the way that this offense is playing, and I will say, I slightly underestimated Burrow this year. I thought it would be another year or two before he was up to this level. I thought he would get there, but I just didn't think it would be this soon. I really think that he's been performing amazingly, and that's despite some offensive line struggles. Obviously the receivers have still been playing well, but I think that the one thing that you have to hope is that you get a good performance out of Clowney. You get a good performance out of these defensive tackles. I expect Garrett to always play well. With the groin injury, hopefully that's fully healed. He's been a limited participant in practice. So hopefully by next week, that is something that's fully healed so he can be at full strength. I really think that it's going to come down to first how much pressure you can get with just those front four, because I mean you don't want to blitz Burrow at all. He's just phenomenal at reading any defense. He can find open guys very quickly. He has plays with very good timing and anticipation. Just this. He's a very smart, cerebral quarterback, and I think the Browns with if their front four can play well, I think their secondary at this point is cohesive and talented enough to be able to keep up with those really good young receivers for the Bengals. So I think they have a chance. I'm not going to say I would favor them. I would think it would be a pretty even line if I had to guess, just because the Browns match up well. I think the Bengals offensively are the more talented offense for sure. I think the Browns are the more talented defense. I think Bengals are more balanced. I think their defense is a more consistent unit than the Browns offense has been this year. So if I had to favor someone, I would say the Bengals, but again, it just becomes so hard because the Browns do match up so well. And I think one of the reasons is you look, and I think the Browns really built this roster to try to beat a team like the Chiefs and the Bills. And I think that you guys are just built so similarly in that same sort of vein where you have these 11 personnel sets, a lot of time, 10 personnel, spreading it out, have these very talented receivers, have a quarterback that can distribute it around the field, and have a good quality running back who is also able to provide some contributions in the passing game. So I really think that the Browns being built for the Chiefs and Bills helps them against the Bengals, just because of the way they're both built.
Well, that is fair. I will say Baker Mayfield is undefeated against the Cincinnati Bengals, and that fact fills me with rage, but it is a fact. So,
yeah, I actually went to his that was my second Browns game, was his first home game against the Bengals. Was my second Browns game I went to, so I was pretty pumped about that one.
Well, I will say there's a little bit of a difference between beating the Bengals like during the rest of Baker Mayfield's career and then the way that they beat the Bengals earlier this year. That one I would say was pretty impressive because the Bengals were on a roll at that point. But, 2018, 2019, 2020, we were the old Bengals back then. Like that was about like the Bengals have once in my entire life been worse than they were during most of Baker Mayfield's career. And that was when I was a little kid. And the 90s for the Bengals were just awful. But, it's a new era in Cincinnati. And, this week, I think against the Chiefs, like a couple of weeks ago, most of us are looking at this game, and most of us who now obviously 8 weeks ago, a lot of us were looking at this game being like, oh man, the Chiefs don't look so good. This might be a game that we can, kind of sneak away with pretty easily. But over the last couple of weeks, it's been pretty obvious that the Chiefs are kind of back to being, the Chiefs, back to being the class of the AFC. And while the Bengals, right now, a lot of people are calling them, one of the, better teams to be, potentially competing with the Chiefs. It's still, the Bengals have the offense to maybe keep up with the Chiefs offense. But it's just, are they actually going to do it? And the Bengals' problem this year has been consistency. Like, are we going to see the 525-yard Joe? But well, we're not going to see that again. That was probably an anomaly. But are we going to see like the elite Joe Burrow type Bengals offense show up, or are we going to see the team that threw a pick six to Denzel Ward in the like on the first drive of the game? It really is depending on, I think, a lot of like which Bengals team shows up, because the Chiefs are going to show up. The Chiefs are going to do what the Chiefs are going to do. But I think it really comes down to like whether the Bengals actually show up or not. So what do you think is going to happen? Because obviously if the Bengals win this game, that's not very good for the Browns' playoff chances.
No, that more or less eliminates them. I believe 538 has a 0.4% chance if the Bengals win for the Browns to make the playoffs.
That's not zero. So
yeah, it's not technically eliminated, but it would take like all the wild card teams to lose out. So highly unlikely.
Right.
Yeah, for me, I look at this Chiefs team and this Bengals team, and first off, very impressed with both teams' performance, especially defensively. I didn't think either team had this type of defensive talent to play the way they were able to play. Surprised by both of those, but I just think that I have to favor the Chiefs, not only because of both defenses playing well, but also you look at Patrick Mahomes, and at a certain point, I know he hasn't lived up to the typical Patrick Mahomes standard, but when you are playing a team that defensively has outperformed expectations, you still expect him to be able to be the guy to overcome that defense and be able to put up big numbers on that team. And so I think this has to be, if not the top game, but the one of the most fun and entertaining games of the week and maybe of the year, just because, like you said, I think this could be a shootout. Now, my number one concern, again, is always going to be when you go back to this Bengals team, that offensive line. This defensive line for Chiefs is playing pretty well, especially since they moved Chris Jones back into the interior. I think they've really, really stepped it up on that defensive line, just getting a lot of pressure. And so that would be my number one concern if I'm a Bengals fan. I think the Chiefs win this, but I could honestly see it with the home field advantage going either way in this one. But if I had to pick, I would pick the Chiefs.
And see, like, part of me wants to say that, that's just the wishful thinking Browns fan in you. But I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like, I went on Around the Block's Double Overtime podcast, and I predicted the Bengals to win, but I mostly predicted the Bengals to win because of a feeling, because I think the Bengals can compete, but it's also like it's gonna be a tough one. It's gonna be probably like the biggest game the Bengals have played since that 2015 playoff game, and I mean, in fairness, there's been basically nothing since that, but this is going to be one of the biggest games. And actually, if you look at 538's like ELO rankings and everything like that, they actually have this game ranked as the single most interesting and best game of any game that's been played, like all 200 however many games have been played across the NFL this year. This is the best one to watch across all of them.
I believe that for sure.
Well, because you got Patrick Mahomes going up against Joe Burrow. Like, I mean, the only other thing that I can think of is like, Patrick Mahomes versus Aaron Rodgers, and we didn't get that. Yeah. We got Jordan Love. So yeah, it is going to be an interesting one for sure. Like I said, I think the Bengals take this one. But I mean, the Browns fan is saying that the Bengals lose, and the Bengals fan is saying the Bengals win. So, take what we're saying with, for whatever y'all feel that's worth. But anyway, Daniel, I appreciate you coming on. You did a great job filling in for Thomas this week, and we certainly wouldn't mind having you on again in the future at some point. We've had a lot of Bengals guests on this podcast because I'm the one with most of the connections and stuff like that. So it just kind of ends up being, I think, a little more skewed towards Bengals fans than Browns fans on this podcast. But if you're interested again, I think we'd love to have you. So appreciate you coming on. Where can the people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Daniel R. Garrett. No, all lowercase, no, nothing in between there, just Daniel R. Garrett. Obviously, atbnetwork.com. I write a good amount. Going to be having some bowl game previews actually coming out a little bit later. I want to get those out for some of the New Year's Six bowls. Probably get a couple of those previews out. And yeah, just that's about it. Those are the places. For Around the Block, also have a Tailgate Talk if you want a little college sports podcast in your life. Talk about mostly college football and basketball, but we'll occasionally hit on a couple other sports. The only one we've really hit on is talking some shit about our baseball teams. Lot of southern colleges. We're Texas, Mississippi State, and Florida fans. So got a lot of that SEC bias going on in that one. But yeah, thank you for having me on the show here, Kyle. Really appreciate it. Love coming on. Kentucky. Oh man, hey, you guys got the best of us this year. I'll say that. So
yeah, it was one of the best Kentucky football seasons that I think we've ever had. It hasn't been great for Kentucky football, but hey, we got a good basketball team.
Yeah, you're about to beat our ass in basketball. My God, wow. Mike White is just. I won't get into it on here, but
look, Mike White. The name Mike White. I don't care what that has to do with basketball. The name Mike White is banned on this podcast because of the Jets.
Oh, he should be banned in all walks of life. That name, I'm not a fan of that name either. Even though he is our coach.
I like it in basketball, but I mean, I'm
you like it because you're a Kentucky fan.
Well, right, but I'm just saying I'm more of a football fan than I am an anything else fan, and so Mike White just by itself, I don't like that name.
I'm right there with you for my dislike for that name as well. So right there with you on that one. But yeah, thank you for having me on, Kyle. I really appreciate it.
All right, Daniel. Well, like I said, I appreciate you coming on, and so let's go ahead on to our Bengals preview. But actually, we're not going to do that because I'm going to do that separately from you. I did that so I could transition in.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Well, I ain't gonna lie to you, Kyle. Our biggest weapon right now is Patrick Mahomes. I can't believe that we picked him up. He was a steal in the draft, and he's been nothing but lighting it up and putting some points on the board and winning some Super Bowls for us. Then we got Byron Pringle kicking the Steelers' ass. You're welcome.
Welcome to the Jungle, Bengals fans. I'm Kyle Phelps, and this is exactly what we all asked for. No matter what happens the rest of the year, the Cincinnati Bengals were a good football team in 2021. They clinched a winning season with the absolute demolition of the Baltimore Ravens JV squad last week, and now they have a chance to prove themselves as legit contenders in the AFC with a matchup against the current number 1 seed in the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs. But before we get to that, I'd just like to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. Really helps my channel out, and it helps you be the first to know when we drop all of our new videos. You're definitely going to want to subscribe and check all of it out because we do these previews with our excellent team of correspondents like Chet, who we're going to talk to later. We do that before each Bengals game. We do reactions and recaps after the games, power rankings at the end of each NFL week, and Battle of Ohio podcast clips on the off days. So, this game against the Chiefs, it's definitely a bit of a daunting task. The Chiefs are a really, really, really good football team. They're the only team in the AFC so far to have clinched anything. I mean, the Bills, Patriots, Titans, Colts, they all have like a 90-something% chance of making the playoffs at this point. But, mathematically, the Chiefs are the only ones who literally cannot miss it now. So, it seems like a great opportunity for the Bengals to have kind of like a measuring stick game, right? If the Bengals lose, they can still go out and win the division with a victory over the Cleveland Browns next week. Actually, even if they lose both games, they still have a 17% chance to win the division. It's interesting. They would need the Steelers to beat the Browns this week, and the Ravens to lose to the Rams, and then the Ravens to beat the Steelers next week. And, on that note, they could still make the playoffs as a wild card team, although at that point it's a bunch of super complicated formulas for that to happen if the Bengals do lose out. The simplest way that I've found so far playing with all the simulators if the Bengals lose out is if the Bills, Chargers, Ravens, Browns, and Raiders all lose this week, and then the Bills lose to the Jets next week. Yeah. Weirdly enough, though, the Bengals can win the division even if they don't win another game this year. If the Ravens lose to the Rams, and then the Browns and Steelers tie this week, yes, seriously. The Bengals can clinch the division this week even if they lose to the Chiefs. But it involves the Steelers and Browns tie, and the Steelers have already tied once this year, so I mean, that seems pretty unlikely. Luckily, you can bypass all of that nonsense if you just go out there, handle business, and come away with the division clinching win. But it's not that simple, right? Now, this is the Kansas City Chiefs, after all. They've represented the AFC in the Super Bowl both of the last 2 years for a reason. Earlier this year, it was starting to look a little questionable as to whether or not they would actually hit the mark that they're expecting to, considering they started the season 3-4. But since then, they've rattled off 8 wins in a row. Now, they're on the verge of clinching the number 1 seed in the AFC with 2 games left to go in the season. They can do that this week if they win and the Titans lose. But if the Bengals win, there's a very slight possibility that the Bengals could steal a first-round bye. That's a 7% chance, according to 538, but it would require the Bengals winning out, the Chiefs also losing to the Broncos the following week, and then the Titans, Colts, and Patriots losing at least one of their next 2 games. But there is a chance. That said, the simplest way to have a chance at any of these good things happening is to simply beat the Chiefs this week. I think you're going to need to have Joe Burrow on his A-game for that to happen. The Chiefs' biggest weakness right now appears to be their secondary, and the Bengals' wide receiver unit is arguably their biggest strength. And I think if Burrow, Chase, Higgins, Boyd, and Uzama can all be at their best this week and find a way to score every time they step on the field, then I think they have a shot to come away with a win this week. Now, if it turns into a defensive game, I don't believe the Bengals are going to win. And it's not that I don't believe in the Bengals' defense, but I don't think I believe in the Bengals' offense's ability to overcome a strong performance by the opposing defense before Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs figure it out. My biggest concern, though, is Travis Kelce. I know he's coming off of COVID, and that usually affects players' abilities the next week or 2 after suffering those symptoms, but the Bengals are going to be missing Jermaine Pratt because of COVID this week. Logan Wilson's been at full practice all week, so, hopefully they'll be getting them back, and that'll be fantastic. But that only leaves one of the Bengals' 3 starting linebackers available for this game. So I worry about their ability to contain the best tight end in the NFL. That said, we've already seen the Bengals go toe-to-toe with one of the best offenses in the NFL this year with the Green Bay Packers. Were it not for a rare missed field goal from Legatron, Evan McPherson, the Bengals would have won that game. Granted, they were only in position to win that game because of a missed field goal from Mason Crosby in the first place, but the point is, they were in that game until the final seconds. So, the idea of them having a chance to beat the Kansas City Chiefs this week doesn't sound too far off. So, to help us preview this game against the Kansas City Chiefs, we've got another new correspondent to the show. His name's Chet, and he runs Chet's Certified Chiefs Cholesterol Cast, sponsored by RibVPN. Say what's up, Chet.
Yeah, what's up, Kyle? Thanks for having me on. I love the Bengals and I love the Chiefs. Can't wait to play you guys next week.
Awesome, Chet. I got to admit, it's refreshing talking to somebody with a pretty positive attitude after having to deal with Reggie and Dan so much this year. But, so why don't you give the audience a little bit of insight on what it's like being a Kansas City Chief fan over the years?
Well, I ain't gonna lie to you, Kyle. Joe Montana being on the team was actually pretty fun for a little bit. Never won anything with us, but, yeah, we ended up going to the playoffs a few years ago, and then we blew that 31-10 lead to the fucking Colts. That was horse shit. At least we got Mahomes now. Now we're winning Super Bowls, and I gotta tell you, it feels pretty nice winning as a Chiefs fan these days.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping the Bengals can get to the levels that the Chiefs have gotten to recently. It seems like it's the transcendent quarterback is always a good jump start for a franchise that's trying to take that next step. So, like, we got Joe Burrow now, and we're hoping Joe Burrow can, be like our Patrick Mahomes. Which kind of more or less brings me to my next question. How would you say the Chiefs' season's been going so far this year?
Well, I ain't gonna lie to you, Kyle. We started off like shit. Had no defense. Pat Mahomes throwing interceptions. Now, actually, we're doing pretty good. I'd say we're not doing dang on bad. I'd say we're, putting up some points. We're writing off a whole bunch of straight wins and kicking our Raiders' ass. That's all that fucking matters here in Kansas City. Kicking our Raiders' ass, and hopefully we'll kick your ass next week, but in a fun way. I don't hate the Bengals, except that time we kicked your ass in Kansas City a couple of years ago. That was fun.
No, that wasn't fun for us at all. I believe you're talking about that time that we had that game back on Monday Night Football back in like 2018 or something like that, and y'all beat us like 45-10, and it really sucked because we got out to a pretty good start that year. We after that game we did beat the Bucs under pretty questionable circumstances, and then we lost 7 of our last 8 games to finish 6-10. That game was kind of like the beginning of the end. But you know what? You know what was fun though? That beatdown y'all had on the Steelers last week. Thank you for that, by the way. I was actually in Pittsburgh during that game, and I got to enjoy the suffering of the Steelers fans firsthand, all while munching on a delicious Primanti's Reuben. Although I will say, they were missing both Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill last week, 2 of their most important offensive weapons. How did they overcome that and still dominate?
Well, I ain't gonna lie to you, Kyle. Our biggest weapon right now is Patrick Mahomes. I can't believe that we picked him up. He was a steal in the draft, and he's been nothing but lighting it up and putting some points on the board and winning some Super Bowls for us. Then we got Byron Pringle kicking the Steelers' ass. You're welcome. And Mecole Hardman's doing pretty good. I have to say we're doing pretty good now. Next man up, that's Culture Kansas City. Next man up, and their numbers called. They're showing up, and I have to say I'm pretty proud of the boys for doing what they're supposed to be doing.
That's true, they are. Particularly that defense, man. They've only allowed opposing teams to score more than 20 points once during your 8-game win streak. There's been a lot of games where they've actually held them under 10 points, and like multiple games, like 3 or 4 at least. So what would you say has been their key to success during that stretch?
Well, I ain't gonna lie to you, because we keep forcing turnovers on the defensive side of the ball. I think we've done like 2 per game in this 8-game win streak. Part of the reason why we destroyed them Steelers. You're welcome. And I think we forced 3 turnovers that game. That was one hell of a game, and hopefully we're gonna do the same to you guys. Even though, like I said, I like you guys, and you're welcome for beating the Steelers. Thank you.
Yeah. Again, y'all helped make my vacation awesome, so I do appreciate that. But you keep talking about kicking our ass, and I think I'm not going to like the Chiefs too much more after that. But anyway, what would you say that the Bengals should try to do this week if they're going to come away with a win?
Well, I'm going to lie to you, Kyle. Our biggest weakness right now is our secondary. I don't know if we're making many interceptions, but I think we're like the 4th worst in the league in terms of 40-yard plus plays allowed. Tyrann Mathieu's actually pretty good. I like watching him play, but he can't do it alone, man. We got to get these cornerbacks doing their jobs, man. I think the way you're going to have to beat us is throw the ball down the field. And I ain't going to lie to you. I think Joe Burrow's got to throw for a lot of yards. I think he's going to throw for like 500 yards again. But hey, remember that one game against the Chiefs and the Rams where both quarterbacks threw for a fuck ton of touchdowns, and that was a good fucking game. We might have that game, so you might have to, score 40 points on us. probably going to be pretty easy. Our defensive line's not too bad, so running the ball ain't going to be too good for you guys. But I anticipate this to be a very good football game.
Right on, man. I think it's going to be a good one, too. You want to give me a prediction on the game?
Well, I ain't gonna lie to you, Kyle. I think we're on that 8-game winning streak, and I don't see any reason why that should end. I think we're gonna win against you guys probably, 35-27. It's gonna be a high-scoring game. I think we're gonna have a lot of good stuff going on in this game. You guys cannot cover tight ends. I saw that game you guys played against the Ravens. Mark Andrews had a good game, and then that game against the 49ers, not Travis Kelce. Who's that motherfucker's name? He's the 49ers. Travis Kelce had a really good game against you guys, and the Chiefs. Travis Kelce gonna have a good game against you guys too. He's gonna catch for 525 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Chet, I believe the name you're looking for is George Kittle.
George Kittle, that's the guy. I knew a guy who went to high school with his sister's brother's former roommate.
That sure is a coincidence, I guess. But anyway, Chet, you planning on coming up to Cincinnati for the game?
I ain't never been up there to Cincinnati. It's awful cold where you guys are at, but I don't know. I think I'll make my way up for the game. I've never been to what's that? Paul Blart Stadium. I've never been down there. I think I'll give it a shot. Try your chili. Looks good.
Paul Blart Stadium. What kind of dumbass comes up with something stupid like that? Well, anyway, Chet, I appreciate you coming on, man. Best of luck to your team in every week but this one.
Well, I ain't gonna lie to you, Kyle. This sure was fun, and I hope you invite me on when we meet in the playoffs.
Oh, definitely. For sure, man. I'll see you later. Well, that was fun. But anyway, guys, I really appreciate you watching this episode of Welcome to the Jungle. So, thank you so much for watching. You can always find more of what I do at KylePhelps92 on Twitter, Facebook.com/ThePhelps, my Bengals coverage at ATBNetwork.com/Cincinnati Bengals, the Battle of Ohio podcast, which is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and right here if you subscribe. But anyway, guys, that's all I got for this one. So I'll leave y'all, as always, with a hootie! Alright, so me and Thomas couldn't get together to actually do this episode, which is why it's such a disjointed episode, and why we had Daniel on for the Browns section. But, so I'm just going to go ahead and run down there's only really one game, the fantasy league. There's only really one game in the fantasy league that actually makes much of a difference, which is, obviously, it's fantasy championship week, so it's my team versus Jordan Heiser's team, Jungle Bungles, and mine's the Mix Administration. I think I won best name, but I don't know, maybe y'all like Jungle Bungles. And then in the consolation bracket, you got Michael Dorsey going up against John Dorsey. So interesting. The consolation bracket is between the two Dorsey brothers. But the game that I think actually really matters here is obviously the fantasy championship. So I got a pretty good matchup. If the numbers end up like they were last week, then that's not looking so good for me, because Jordan's team absolutely went ham last week with 144.96, almost 145 points. My team did pretty well, I felt like, with almost 125 points. It was 124.90, but didn't quite, doesn't quite hit that mark that Jordan set last week. Although, my team's projected to win this week. So, in theory, my team should do pretty well here. But I think it really depends on which Kyler Murray shows up, which Josh Allen shows up, because sometimes he goes insane, and that's part of the reason why Jordan's had some of these huge games. Now, I've pretty much emptied my bench for this game, so, the idea is, if my team doesn't win, there was no chance for my team to ever win, because I've got 4 guys on injured reserve. I got 4 guys on COVID, and 1 guy on IR. That's Jerry Jeudy, Kirk Cousins, Duke Johnson, Dan Arnold. They're all on COVID, and I got Robert Tonyan on IR. Luckily, I got George Kittle, so I think George Kittle's a pretty good tight end. And Mike Williams just came off of COVID, so that should work out pretty well for me. But on Jordan's side, man, you got, Deebo Samuel's been tearing it up lately, and, that's part of what I'm worried about. You got David Montgomery. He's been having just a generally really good season. I'm surprised at Rashad Penny, but, he's been doing pretty well. The one thing I would maybe consider doing if I was Jordan, if he, if you're listening to this, Jordan, I'm probably maybe against my better judgment giving you advice on how to beat me. But I would maybe see about maybe Hunter Renfrow makes a little more sense over Deontay Johnson because I think the Steelers are terrible. But, Hunter Renfrow is going up against the Colts defense, so maybe not. And then there's Elijah Mitchell. I really think that Elijah Mitchell might be a bit of a safer play than Rashad Penny if he plays. He is listed as questionable, so you just really never know. But other than that, I think these two teams are currently set at probably what is their ideal lineup. Hopefully, COVID doesn't throw a wrench into that because there's a lot of questions about what's going on there. Jordan does have Pratt Freiermuth and Nick Folk, who are listed as questionable this week in his starting lineup. So hopefully, for his sake, that doesn't. Hopefully, for his sake, they're available. Although, to be honest, if Pat Freiermuth doesn't play, like CJ Uzama, I'm sure he'll have a pretty decent game. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. But yeah, not really a whole lot to talk about this week. You got literally one game that matters, and that's the fantasy championship, and that's me and Jordan Heiser. So, I mean, outside of that, there's not a whole lot going on here. We're going to crown a champion this week, and if it's me, then if it's Jordan, maybe we'll have Jordan on and he can talk about the fantasy season and all that. But I don't know if I'm the fantasy champion, then I guess I'll gloat. I'll be like, yeah, I won the fantasy league, but I don't think we'll do anything special for that because obviously I'm already the host of the podcast. So. But anyway, thank you so much for watching, guys. You can always find more of what I do at Kyle Phelps92 on Twitter, Facebook.com/The Phelps, my Bengals coverage, ATBnetwork.com/Cincinnati Bengals. You can always catch more of what Thomas does at T_star94 on Twitter and Instagram. And on YouTube and TikTok, he's the Thomas J Network. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you like it. Leave it a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It helps us out a lot and helps more Bengals and Browns fans be able to enjoy a little bit more of this rivalry that we really think is building between the Bengals and Browns. So, like I said, thanks for listening, guys, and hopefully we'll have a proper episode for you next week, and we won't be missing too many more episodes after that.